Hi everyone and welcome back to Mormon Claims. Today we'll be exploring the possible relationship between Joseph Smith, the prophet of the Restoration, and psychotropic substances for the express purpose of inducing spiritual experiences. To begin with then, it should be noted that I do recognise that this is a particularly contentious matter to explore, as the LDS Church takes, as you probably know, a negative view on the consumption of many substances, banning, as it does, the use of all alcohol, tobacco, illegal drugs, coffee and tea. And so obviously even considering the question as to whether Joseph Smith, their founder, consumed any psychoactive agents is going to ruffle some feathers, to say the least. I'm obviously not going to allow other people's apprehensions to impede my inquiry, but as always, I do proceed as respectfully as possible. So the reason such a claim would even be made in the first place is in order to account for the various visions that Joseph Smith made record of over the course of his lifetime. Visions which invariably involve Smith being usually alone and then appearing unto him some biblical figure, an angel, a prophet, or Jesus himself, who would then impart onto him some message. So as it turns out, Santa Claus, knowing me well obviously, actually brought me this year this new faux leather triple collection of Mormon scriptures to replace my other more battle-scarred books. So I'm going to read you a very short section from Joseph Smith History Chapter 1 towards the end of the chapter, which reads, "I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. It no sooner appeared than I found myself delivered from the enemy which held me bound. When the light rested upon me, I saw two personages, whose brightness and glory defy all description, standing above me in the air. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, and said, pointing to the other, This is my beloved Son, hear him. My object in going to inquire of the Lord was to know which of all the sects was right, that I might know which to join. No sooner, therefore, did I get possession of myself as to be able to speak, than I asked the personages who stood above me in the light which of all the sects was right, for at this time it had never entered into my head that they were all wrong, and which I should join. I was answered that I was to join none of them, for they were all wrong, and the personages who addressed me said that all their creeds were an abomination in his sight," and on it goes. So whenever miraculous claims of this sort are made, many people are inclined to either simply deny that they happened, or alternatively, to seek out a real-to-life explanation. And there's nothing new in that. Seeking out some kind of explanation which accords with one's own experience of reality is an exercise with a long history. It can be done and has been done with all religious traditions at some point. In Christianity, which I'm most familiar with, some examples which come to mind is Moses' parting of the Red Sea being understood as some kind of tidal phenomena, the star that led the wise men being a comet, or how did Jesus heal the sick? Well, it was his ability to alleviate psychosomatic conditions through suggestion, and on you could go in this manner, giving naturalistic explanations for the seemingly miraculous. And likewise, true believers can join in with this game by seeking to demonstrate just how improbable such naturalistic explanations are for whatever reason. Now, generally speaking, I don't find this kind of speculation very satisfying. I tend to favour the maxim that thinking is more interesting than knowing. And if you know such and such a thing, it may very well stymie your desire for further inquiry. If, for instance, taking the Moses' parting of the Red Sea being a tidal phenomena claim, supposing that were true, one would be in grave danger of missing all the deeper mythological significance that is wrapped up with that event as it comes to us in the narrative. Which is not to say that it's definitely not true, that it's not a tidal phenomena. I just wouldn't want to lose sight of the larger picture. I'd want to hold such claims lightly. So it's in this same spirit that I approach the various naturalistic explanations for Joseph Smith and his visionary experiences. So the first and perhaps the most obvious choice, the way Mormon missionaries often present this when they come knocking at your door, is as a binary choice. That it's either true as presented in the Book of Mormon, or it's false, and we must pray in it to find our answer. If false, then we might assume that Joseph Smith is simply a con man who fabricated the whole thing for his own dastardly purposes. And a lot of ink has been spilt on that claim, on that idea. Which I'm not going to dwell on here. So for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to both assume that it's not true as given, and I'm also going to disregard the idea that he simply made it all up. And so with these two assumptions in place, or these two suppositions in place, we can dig down and find some alternative possibilities. We can consider some other more naturalistic explanations. So let's go through some of the possibilities. 1. Perhaps an out-of-body experience. Out-of-body experiences are well-documented phenomena which can be induced through a whole host of different reasons, from brain injury to sensory deprivation, dehydration, sleep disorders, and so on. 2. Animal magnetism, which was a practice that involved the manipulation of psychical energies. Again, it doesn't matter so much if such a phenomena is true. It's enough to merely demonstrate that people practicing animal magnetism made similar claims to Joseph Smith. And it just so happens that animal magnetism, or mesmerism as it was also known, was in fact sweeping through this area of America in the early 1800s. In fact, the famous mesmerist Phineas Quimby, who championed mesmerism in the States, was actually born just 2 towns over from where Joseph Smith was born just a few years prior. And I'm not going to dwell on that connection any further here, maybe in a future video. Okay, explanation number 3. There's the possibility that it's just simply some kind of mental illness, or dissociative disorder, or the result of, childhood trauma, something like that. Explanation number 4. That these accounts are merely the product of automatic writing. Explanation number 5, that these visions are the result of self-induced trances which brought forth these hallucinations, which he believed were in-the-flesh visions. Explanation number 6, which is similar to that they are merely dreams, which he believed were these in-the-flesh visions. Number 7, and this connects back to my holding to things lightly point, and the idea that Smith may have merely fabricated the whole thing, and there may be a kind of murky middle ground, that there's some degree of fabrication that took place, but it's a kind of half-truth which Smith came to believe. And again, that is definitely not unprecedented. Even if you take a kind of very ridiculous, flamboyant example, like the creator of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, who of course, made up his whole religion, being the science fiction writer that he is, there's good evidence to suggest that in the end, at the end of his lifetime, he did actually believe his own mythology. He believed his own story. Now, I've probably missed out some other possible explanations of how Joseph Smith came to have these visions, but now I will come on to the central topic of this video, number 8. That the visions were brought forth through the ingestion of psychoactive substances. Now, the first thing it's important to clarify, with any of these explanations actually, but particularly for this final psychoactive substance explanation, is that just because these visions may have been induced naturalistically, that does not automatically entail that these visions are ostensibly untrue. Is there not the possibility that God used a naturalistic means to bring forth his truth? Which is to say, God used the tools he had to hand, including the somewhat flawed figure of Joseph Smith himself, to reveal the messages he had for humanity. So when it comes to psychoactive substances, the idea would be then that there is a spiritual dimension that lies somewhere beyond the veil, and that these substances, whatever substances we may be talking about, help one to access that dimension of reality. So it's well documented that psychedelics such as psilocybin induce mystical experiences in those that take those substances. So now we get on to the evidence. What is the evidence that Joseph Smith took any of these substances? So for the evidence, I'm referring to a paper entitled The Ethnogenic Origins of Mormonism, a paper that I've linked down in the description below. And it gives some good reason to suppose that this might be true. So in order then, number one, such substances were readily available in every area that the Smith family ever resided. Number two, Joseph Smith was mentored by people who would have known about this stuff. He was schooled in such esoteric practices. Number three, the visionary experiences in early Mormonism were on demand rather than spontaneous. Number four, Joseph Smith devised a method, what is that method, to facilitate dramatic religious experiences amongst his followers. Number five, there was an association between early Mormon visionary experiences and participation in Mormon ordinances, where bread and wine were served and oil anointings were received, which is to say that there's definitely some link there between these psychotropic substances and the receiving of sacraments. Number six, visionary experiences of the magnitude experienced during Joseph Smith's life ceased at his death, which is to suggest that Joseph Smith acted during his lifetime as a kind of shamanic figure, administering such substances to his followers, and that this practice ended with his death. If you'd like to explore this topic further, I may do a follow-up video if this one generates enough interest. Otherwise, I'll just refer you to that paper that I mentioned, and again, I've linked it down in the description below. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.